Hi, thanks for joining us for week 1 of Kingdom Kids Online. Babies are completely reliant on their parents for everything. Maybe you have a baby brother or sister that you can think of. They need their parents to give them food, change their nappy, and all sorts of other things. Without their parents, it would be a disaster. In the same way, we are completely reliant on God for everything. One part of the Lord's Prayer involves thanking Him for how He gives us our daily bread. Our daily bread is just another word for the things we need. Us relying on God for these things should change the way that we treat what we have in life. We should be humble because we haven't earned or deserve any of the good things we have. As well as this, it's important to pray for needs, not wants, because what we need can be enjoyed. Also, we should give others what they need, as God is just as concerned for them as He is for us. We should be humble because we haven't earned or deserve any of the good things we have. Instead, we have them because God gives them to us. Since God gives these good things to us, we should be thanking Him whenever we get them. Being humble also means not showing off to others for how cool we are for the good things we have. When people ask us how we came first in sports, school, or a game, we should point them to God. We should tell them about how incredible He is for giving us our daily bread. It's also important to pray for needs, not wants, because even what we need can still be enjoyed. We shouldn't treat God like a vending machine, picking which good stuff we'd like to get out of Him. He also shouldn't be treated like Santa, with us expecting that He'll always give us what we ask for. Instead, God gives us what's way more important, the things we need. While a PlayStation, iPhone, or new pet might be nice, we should be asking for what keeps us alive. We should be praying to God for the food, water, shelter, and even life itself that He gives us. It's important to be grateful for these things, thanking Him for the way that He looks after us. Stuff can be enjoyed too. It's God who gives us yummy food and a nice house. And as we'll see when Becca does some cooking later on, even our daily bread can be enjoyable. We should also give others what they need, as God is just as concerned for them as He is for us. As we've seen so far, He's so amazing for giving us the things we need, and even the things we want. We should respond by treating those around us in the same way. If someone we know doesn't have everything they need, we can be generous by giving them what we can. This is an important thing to do, because God asks us to act like His Son Jesus. Jesus was the ultimate example of someone who gave others what they needed. He gave us the gift of forgiveness and life forever with Him through His sacrifice on the cross. So Jesus calls on us to act in the same self-sacrificial way by giving others what they really need. This means doing so even when we might lose something of our own. This way, we can help God give others, who He's just as concerned for, their daily bread. Today, we saw how we can be humble because we haven't earned or deserve anything we have. We also found out how we should pray for needs, not wants, as what we need can still be enjoyed. As well as this, we saw how we can be generous, as God is concerned for others as well as ourselves. Just like a baby relies on its parents, we're completely reliant on our Father in heaven for everything. The ultimate example of God giving us our daily bread was the way in which He gave us His Son. We should respond by seeing our need for Jesus and the need for those around us to know Him.
So, this week we are learning about God giving us our daily bread. So, we thought it would be fun if we could actually make some bread. So, Hannah's going to make bread today. We're taking our recipe from the Stephanie Alexander Cook's Companion, and this is called olive bread. If you don't like olives, you don't need to put olives in. In fact, you can add in whatever you like that you think would make your bread delicious. So you're going to need a few things, which Hannah's already got on her table. You'll need 600 grams of strong flour, which is white flour, If you're using olives, 150 grams of stoned black olives, that's where they take the stones out, and you're going to halve those. 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 tablespoon of instant dried yeast, and 2 teaspoons of finely chopped rosemary, if you want to put that in. The last 3 things you'll need will be 4 tablespoons of olive oil, 300 mils of warm water, and sea salt. And that's it. That's all you need to make bread. Now, we will send you the ingredients and the recipe for after, but we thought you might like to watch Hannah making it to start with. So, Hannah has already put in the flour, 600 grams of flour, and the salt, 2 teaspoons of salt, into her bowl. Next, she's going to put in the yeast, which is 1 tablespoon of dried yeast. So now that she's got the flour, the salt, and the yeast in the bowl, if she wants to add rosemary, she can, but I don't think she is today. So the next thing in a separate bowl is we're going to add oil to water. So Hannah's already measured out the water. It's 300 mils of warm water, and to that she's adding 4 tablespoons of olive oil. Okay, now Hannah's going to make a well in the flour, which just means she's going to make a little hole in the middle of the flour. Use a fork. So she's going to mix up her flour, her salt, and her yeast. She's going to make a little hole in the middle of that dry ingredients. And then she's tipping the water and the oil into the flour. Okay, now she's going to mix that really well with her fork. And once that's gotten all well combined, she's going to tip that onto her oiled workbench, which will be her breadboard today.
We can edit out.
So what she wants to do is to mix it well.
Can someone else mix it? Why? Because I don't know how to mix it. Yes, it mixes well. We're gonna have to cut out some parts, otherwise it's gonna be really long. Don't do that. Why?
And you need to oil your hands. Oil your hands before you get them in there.
I know, but do that when Becca's not standing in front of the camera. Maybe. Just cut this out. So don't say oil your hands. You know? I'm sorry. Oh.
Okay, just mix it with your hand, it's fine.
Okay. Okay, so what Hannah wants to do is put oil on her hands and onto the workbench that she's going to be kneading on. And she'll just spread the oil over that workbench with her hands. And now comes the fun bit, because she's going to take the dough mixture out of the bowl very carefully, plop it onto her workbench, and she's going to start kneading it. Now this is going to take 15 minutes. You can see it's all crumbly and not together, but as you begin to knead it, it will all come together to make one piece of dough. If you have an electric mixer at home, you can get your mum or dad to help you with that, and there's a thing called a dough hook. So you just put the dough hook onto your electric mixer and it will mix it for you for 15 minutes. But I reckon this is the fun way to do it, to mix it yourself with your hands. You'll need somebody to keep time for you because you want to do this for 15 minutes. Okay, so Hannah has been kneading for 15 minutes and our dough has come together beautifully. So now she's going to put some oil into her bowl and going to place the dough in the lightly oiled bowl, and then just put a tea towel, a clean tea towel over the top, and you just leave that in a place where it won't be windy until it doubles in size. This will take about 45 minutes, so go and do something fun and then come back in 45 minutes and we'll see what our dough looks like. Okay, so your dough should have risen to about double of what it was before. Now we're going to be really gentle with our dough. If you could tip it gently onto your workbench, and hopefully if you've oiled your bowl enough, it'll come out without any problem. So now gently we're going to work it into a loaf, and before you do that, just put some oil on your hands so it doesn't stick to the dough.
Can you tell me what to do? This is not gentle. I don't know what to do. Is that long enough? Is that long enough? Is this long enough? You can talk.
Keep going. Alright, so this bit is a bit tricky, but it really doesn't matter. It's just you're trying to make whatever shape loaf you would like to. So while Hannah's doing that, I thought, you know, you could go and buy your bread, but I think this helps us to understand how the bread is made by lots of ingredients which God has given us. And it's from those ingredients that we get to eat delicious bread. So think about that as you're making it. So, Hannah, have you finished making your loaf of bread? Excellent. So now she's gently going to put it onto her floured tea towel. That just means a tea towel which has got flour on it. And we might wrap it up actually in that tea towel. And then you're going to leave it for half an hour to keep rising. The last bit to this recipe is you just put a baking tray into your oven and put the oven on at 220 degrees Celsius. So definitely get a parent to help you with that. And you're going to take the dough out of the tea towel, pop it onto your tray. So you'll take the tray out of the oven, so the tray will be very hot, be very careful. Put the dough onto the tray and then just pop it back in the oven. Before you do that, you might just want to sprinkle it with some sea salt, and then you're going to bake it for 20 minutes. And then you just take it out and they say it's delicious served up warm. So we hope you enjoy making your bread this week. We would love to see photos of your bread after you've eaten it or while you're eating it with your family. And yeah, just send us pictures through. Okay, have fun making your bread. Bye.
Okay, why don't we continue? Hello, next we have a challenge for you to do at home if you want, and basically the aim is to finish the sentence by holding an object and taking a picture. So the sentence is, give us our daily something starting with B. So you'll look around your house, or you can even make something that starts with the letter B and then send it to us, and we'll pick whoever's is the funniest, and the winner will get a prize. Next up, after this, we'll have a Bible aerobics that you can dance to and have a bit of fun. And thanks for watching this week's Kingdom Kids video.
God has spoken. It's in the Bible.
The Bible.
And you want to read his word faithfully, don't you?
It's the Bible.
And if you're going to do that, you need to read each part as part of the whole.
You need to read each part as part of the whole.
You need to read each part as part of the whole. Ready? Quick summary. Creation, rejection, promise of blessing, land and nation, Exodus to make a kingdom but divided, exile, return. Jesus' life, death, resurrection, preaching the message to every nation while awaiting his new creation. Each part of
The Bible.
will be part of one of these parts, which will be part of the whole.
The whole Bible.
So let's keep warming up
To read the Bible.
by working out each one of these parts. Ready? Creation. God spoke and made the world. God spoke and made the world. Then God made people to rule the world. God made people to rule the world. It's all good. Quick summary. God's people in God's place under God's rule. God's people in God's place under God's rule. You got it? God's people in God's place under God's rule. And finished. Great stuff. Number 2, creation. Rejection. We reject God. You're not the boss. I am. We reject God. You're not the boss. I am. It's the problem of sin. It's the problem of sin. Can't live with God. No rule. No rule. Can't live with each other. No people. No people. Can't live in the world. No place. No place. It's the problem of sin. The problem of sin. And we need saving from this problem we're in. Top stuff. Ready for part 3? Quick summary. Creation, rejection, promise of blessing, land and nation. God's going to solve the problem of sin with 3 promises to Abraham. The promise of nation, God's people, the promise of land, God's place, the promise of blessing, God's rule. He promised them to Abraham, then Isaac, then Israel. But there was still the problem of sin, and we need to be saved from this problem we're in. Part 4. Creation, rejection, promise of blessing, land and nation, Exodus. 1, 2, 3, 4. God made a nation. That's Israel, God's people. But they're in Egypt. No place, no rule. They're slaves. That's it. Be the slave. Oh yeah. Now Moses, part those seas. God saves. And then at Sinai, God gives his law, his rule. At Sinai, God gives his law, his rule. But sacrifices show the problem of sin, that we need saving from this problem we're in. Fantastic. Ready for part 5? Quick summary. Creation, rejection, promise of blessing, land and nation, Exodus to make a kingdom. God gives Israel the promised land. God gives Israel the promised land. But the judges show the problem of sin, that we need saving from this problem we're in. Then the first king Saul rejected God. We need the promise to David, the promise of God. a Messiah, a Christ, a King. Oh yeah, a Messiah, a Christ, a King. Oh yeah. Then Solomon builds the temple. Build it. It's almost God's people in God's place under God's rule. God's people in God's place under God's rule. But Solomon still had the problem of sin, and we need saving from this problem we're in. Summary into part 6. Ready? Creation, rejection, promise of blessing land and nation, Exodus to make a kingdom but divided. Solomon, then his sons, reject God. Can't live with each other. They fight. So Israel divides. Judah south, Israel north. Israel divides. Judah south, Israel north. They've still got the problem of sin and still need saving from this problem they're in. Tops. Part 7. Creation, rejection, promise of blessing land and nation, Exodus to make a kingdom but divided, exile. Israel in the north have the problem of sin, so exiled by Assyria. Bye bye, and dead. But Judah still needs saving from the problem of sin. God's promise through Isaiah, a servant who will suffer to deal with sin. A servant who will suffer to deal with sin. But first, part 8. Creation, rejection, promise of blessing land and nation, Exodus to make a kingdom but divided, exile. Ready? Here we go! Judah south still with the problem of sin, so exiled to Babylon. Bye-bye. People need changing, but how? Promise through Jeremiah, new heart. A new heart is what's needed for the problem of sin. But first, they're slaves in Babylon, 70 years. They're slaves in Babylon, 70 years. No people, no place, no rule. Where's the promise? No people, no place, no rule. Where's the promise? Part 9. Creation, rejection, promise of blessing land and nation, Exodus to make a kingdom but divided, exile, return. Back to Jerusalem, rebuilding the wall. Oh yeah, rebuilding the temple. Oh yeah, but still under rule of the Persians, Greeks, then Romans. So where is God's promise? They've still got the problem of sin and still need saving from this problem they're in. Then silence. So, yeah! Great job. We've just summarized the whole Old Testament.
Of the Bible.
Ready for the new? Here we go. Creation, rejection, promise of blessing land and nation, Exodus to make a kingdom but divided, exile, return. Jesus, life, death, resurrection. God becomes a human. He's the Christ. He's the servant, baptized for his mission. He's the Christ. He's the servant, always lives under God, no problem of sin. Then this servant dies to deal with sin. Then God keeps his promise, raises his Christ. He is God's person. He is God's place. He is God's ruler forever and ever. He can save us from the problem of sin. Yeah. But now, creation, rejection, promise of blessing land and nation, Exodus to make a kingdom but divided, exile, return. Jesus, life, death, resurrection, preaching the message to every nation. Jesus ascends, then sends his spirit. Time to preach. Preach it. Trust Jesus. He takes away your sin. Trust Jesus. Turn and live for him. Trust Jesus. Then wait for him to come back. Big finish! Creation, rejection, promise of blessing, land and nation, exodus to make a kingdom, but divided, exile, return. Jesus, life, death, resurrection, preaching the message to every nation while awaiting his new creation. He's coming back to judge. He's coming back to judge. Every nation will bow. Every nation will bow. He brings his people to his place under his rule. He brings his people to his place under his rule. No more problem of sin. No more problem of sin. It's all good. Forever.